All right, it looks like we are live with the Civics of Technology March Madness Must Read Books event. So this is one of our first of many, hopefully, live events where we're hoping we can bring people together to talk about technology and how we teach it in schools and how we think about it, and maybe just sometimes complain about why our computers start to break when we start the live stream. Fingers crossed, it looks like we're doing okay. So for anyone joining us, we're really excited to have you here. Of course, we will have this recorded and this will go directly to YouTube once it is completed. And then we will be putting up a blog post. But let me talk a little bit about what we're doing today. So the purpose of March Madness is to crown a winner. And so what we're going to do today is we are going to, in this live stream event, we have a team of experts. We have 6 different experts who are going to bring us their perspectives on some of what they think are the best books about technology that can help us be better educators and better scholars about it. And so we're going to try to identify a must-read book. We do have a point system. Now, I'm keeping track of it, so I can't say that this is objective. I don't even know if this is fair, but sometimes refs, people complain about them. So we'll see how you all think we do with this today. But this is part of the larger Civics of Technology project, which is really a site that several of us here have started to try to bring people together to talk about this stuff, to share resources and do work. So if you are interested in doing some of this stuff, please join in, check out the site, read the weekly blog posts, and help us come up with more ideas for events like this. And so we will have a follow-up blog post. That's one of the things you can look to after this event, where we come up with our must-read list of books and talk about what's next. Are we going to do book clubs? Are we going to all just read these books individually? What's the plan? So here's what we're going to do today. In about 90 seconds, first we're going to start with introductions of our candidates. This is kind of like of Jeopardy here, right? So in Jeopardy, they ask you to introduce yourself and then say something about yourself. So if y'all can all think about something you want to tell us, it could be silly, it could be whatever. I know Dr. Marie Heath has some good stuff she always can draw on, and now I have an expectation what she will include. And so just if you want to introduce yourselves, tell us something interesting. And then also, what made you be interested in technology as an educator, right? Like, where did your passion come from? What drives you? And we will go ahead and go in order and let each person go after everyone's introduced themselves. So again, just take like 30 seconds to a minute to kind of share who you are. And then after everyone's gone, then we'll go over the rules and we will get started in our pitches of books. So let me go ahead and change our format here. And I'm going to turn it over to Earl. Can you start us off? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Erl Aguilera. I am currently an assistant professor at the Kremen School of Education and Human Development at California State University, Fresno. My job used to be at a previous institution, teaching teachers how to teach kids how to read. I was trained as a reading specialist. And nowadays, most of what I do is teach teachers how kids learn. I do a lot of work in the learning sciences around technology, as well as multicultural education at the school. Let me see. Things to know about me. I don't know. What is there to know? I describe myself as a hungry person, like just that's a character trait of mine. It doesn't matter. I could literally have just eaten and I'll want to eat more food. So hunger is not like a temporary status for me. It's just it's a state of being. So that's an important character trait I think I'd like to put out there. Okay.
Is it my turn, I think?
No pressure at all, but yeah, it looked like it is.
Sorry, Leigh, I don't know if I accidentally got out of order there, but if you're willing to go ahead.
Sure. People confuse my middle name with my last name sometimes. So technically my last name is Wolf. So that's a fun tip. And my mother did not give me a middle name thinking that I would get married and that I would take my partner's name as my third name. So that can be my fun fact for the day. I'm a clinical associate professor at Arizona State University in their Leadership and Innovation EDD program. So I spend a lot of time with amazing educators helping them through their dissertation process. Prior to ASU, I was co-director of a Master of Arts in Educational Technology program at Michigan State University, where I spent many, many years working with teachers, integrating technology. My own passion and love for technology came from a very early age. My father was a photographer. There was always technology in our house. I worked at my high school radio station, college radio station. A disc jockey was my original career. So I've always done techie sort of things. And then my first job was at a school as a network administrator. So then that's how my two paths crossed and the educational technology side came to be. One last thing, speaking of hunger, most of the books behind me are cookbooks. I really like to cook and take a lot of inspiration from my teaching from cooking. So mostly cookbooks back there.
Okay, I think alphabetically I'm in there, but I'm not quick on the alphabetizing, but I'll jump in. My name's Marie Heath. I am an assistant professor of educational technology at Loyola University, Maryland. And before I did that, I worked, I was a high school social studies teacher. So I have sort of two academic interests, which are social studies and civic engagement. And then also the ed tech side and technology and technology integration and just technology integration in schools. So that's my sort of professional background. I really appreciate that Earl said he was a hungry person. First, I was like, oh, he's going to say he's like hungry for knowledge. And he's, I was like, oh, and he is like a hungry person that way. But then when he said it was that he likes to eat regularly, I thought like, oh, I found my people, because I'm an all day eater. So I really appreciate that, to hear that there are other people that way as well. And my fun fact is that I don't have a whole lot of basketball experience, but my biggest basketball memory is that the University of Delaware Blue Hen pushed me at a basketball game because I was the mascot for my university, Towson University, and he pushed me down and I fell as the mascot on like in the middle of the whole like game, and I thought the tiger has to get up, but I'd lost all feeling in my leg and I like stood up, and then the blue hen kind of helped me off, and I'll never pull a blue hen's tail again, I guess. That's my story.
I was hoping you'd have a mascot story, and thanks for everyone bearing with me as I get our technology figured out here. We're on to Lance Mason.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lance Mason. I'm an associate professor of education at Indiana University, Kokomo, going up for full this year. My interest in tech, really my interest is in media, but my research kind of conflates those two things, which I'll probably talk about in the books. But I came to that through an interest in politics and political discourse and kind of where it was heading as technologies changed. Got me very into that kind of as a topic for research. An interesting basketball thing about me, basketball fact, I won a region-wide shooting competition in basketball when I was 12. So look out.
All right. Yeah, we're going to follow up with a real basketball game after this event.
Anytime, brother, anytime.
Hey, everyone. I'm Phil Nichols. I'm an assistant professor, technology and literacy education at Baylor University. I guess before that, I was a middle school and high school English teacher. And I think that was sort of where my interest in I don't know if that's where my interest in technology began. I was media studies major in undergrad along with English. But I think in the classroom and having a sort of media studies background, I became really interested in how, like, as a teacher, you're sort of constantly enduring the sort of, march of new technological innovations that are supposed to make everything better and often make things way worse. And so I became really interested in how and why certain things get, sort of coded as innovations and things that we needed to use or not use. And how certain things that were, quote, outmoded, might have been more useful than some of the innovative things. And so I started studying that when I found out that was a thing that you could do. You could just research that and write about it and work with schools and all. So yeah, that's what I do now. And a fun fact, I was trying to think of like a good like sports fun fact, but I don't have many good sports stories. But I will say I did once score. The only points that I ever scored in a basketball game was in middle school, and it was a 3-pointer that I thought was going to be a game-winning 3-pointer. But the other team came back and beat us a few seconds afterward. But for a moment, I sort of lived in the glory of it. So yeah, that's my fun fact.
All right, and I'm coming up last. So my name is Jacob Pleasance. I'm an assistant professor of science education at the University of Oklahoma, a former high school physical science teacher. And I'll start with a little bit of, I guess, fun fact, sports-wise. So I've never been good at team sports, and have avoided those. But I'm an enthusiast of the solo sports events. You'll see some bicycles behind me. I love to bike. I love to run. I love to do those sorts of things. But this idea of playing in some sort of bracket it's a little new to me. I've found when I first got on to kind of thinking more critically and deeply about technology, I don't know what it was, but I sort of picked up on something there that just drew me in, and I just couldn't stop. I don't know what it was about it. And it has sustained me ever since. So I guess that makes me a hungry person for this particular technology topic. Also, I appreciate all the food enthusiasts in the room here today. I am a fellow enthusiast of food.
So I really appreciate everyone who is here today. And so you can see we have a really great field of teams that are going to compete and try to have their books win today. So let me go over the rules for everyone and that we're definitely going to abide by. And I'm not going to vary for these rules at all because we have a long tradition around this type of book club rules. All right, so here's how this game is going to be played. Each of you will get to nominate 2 books, and you'll get to do your 2 consecutively, right? So you have about 3 minutes. I'll keep an eye on the time. And each book, once you nominate it, is going to get a point right off the bat. So you've already have a nice little advantage going forward here. And then also for those that are watching, if anyone in the audience wants to nominate books later, you can also nominate books. Now, you don't even have to make your case. But it's like an easier shot since you don't have to make your case. So you only get a half a point if you're an audience nominated book. But we're going to put it in there and let people vote on it. We'll do that at the end. So if you stick with us and watch this, you can nominate books if you were watching in the live stream. So participants and audience members can each vote for 3 books at the end. So we're going to nominate all the books, and then we all get to vote for them. But you cannot vote for your own books. Okay, you already gave them the points by nominating them. So you're going to have to listen to the cases that other people make and think about who's making the most compelling case for a book to be on our must-read list. This is a book we think educators and scholars who think in those intersections of education and technology should be reading. And so we're going to try to come up with our list that way. Each of these votes will be worth 0.5. So it'll be worth half a point. And so we'll see how it'll play out, and that'll help give us our list. So our winners, of course, we have to have a winners at the end of this, right, are going to be at the top of our must-read books list about technology. And along with the live stream, we'll add this to our site, and we'll add this as a blog. So that makes it really official, right? Once you put things in words, that makes it official. Videos, kind of anyone could say anything on videos. So I'm sure Lance can talk about that when he gets to his media ecology stuff here in a little bit. So, all right. So if you are in the live stream and you want to make comments, you can make comments in the live stream. For example, you can see Brad Robinson just said, "Hi, everyone, excited for the game." So we can bring your comments right into the chat. So please go ahead, and we're grateful for anyone that's here and excited. So, all right. So we're going to go back in order, and apologies, Dr. Wolf. I'm going to stick with the order we had, if that's okay, even though it is out of order. Apologies for that. But we're going to start with Erl, and we're going to allow you to make your case for your books.
All right. When do you, does the time start as soon as I start pitching, or is it going right now?
I don't want you to be scared if I said it's already started. No, we will go ahead and start it once you start to talk, and I actually will have slides for each of you. And so if you want to go in the order with the slides we have here, let me see. Hold on, let me get into it. We should be able to go here. Oh, did I already reveal it for you? Here we go. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm ready.
Okay, you've got the floor, and I'll keep time, and I'll let you know when the buzzer goes off and the shot clock is out.
All right. So first off, I am here pitching for The Digital Edge, written by S. Craig Watkins, along with co-authors Alex Cho, Andres Lombana Bermudez, Vivian Shaw, Jacqueline Ryan Vickery, and Lauren Weinzimmer. The title of the book refers to the concept of the digital edge in at least two senses. So in one sense, the book looks at the ways that tech developments, practices, and policies have historically marginalized and continue to differentially impact low-income Black students, Latinx students, and other students of color. That is, push them to the edge of schools and society. In another sense, the digital edge also refers to the innovative, peer-driven, and impassioned ways that these same Black and Latinx youth in particular have reappropriated these technologies toward their own personal and social ends. The book follows the experiences of students at Freeway High School across a year-long ethnographic study. And as the authors summarize, their eager adoption of different technologies forge new possibilities for learning and creating that recognize the collective power of youth, peer networks, inventive uses of technology, and impassioned interests that are remaking the digital world. So for those of you who are interested in the social context and the usage of digital technology in our schools today, this one is for you. All right, sorry, I had to clear my throat real quick. Secondly, I am pitching for Disruptive, Fixation, School Reform and the Pitfalls of Techno, Idealism by Christo Sims. This is also an ethnographic work about technology in schools. And this one is a little controversial in the field of games learning in society, as well as connected learning, because it sheds kind of a critical light on one of the darling projects of those movements, a school designed with game-based learning at the core. What I found to be powerful about this book is how it cuts through a lot of the hype of game-based learning, gamification, and a lot of kind of tech-centric solutions, and instead highlights the realities of what this looks like in practice, warts and all. Sims interrogates what happens when the rubber of tech idealism hits the road of complex social issues, including economic inequality, systemic racism, and standardized accountability systems in education. If you are unafraid to have your hopes dashed of a game-based future of education for the purposes of instead dreaming up a more equitable, sustainable, and liberatory vision for the future, this one is for you.
Wow, that was well timed. I can obviously tell if you did notice already, we let the number one seed in the bracket go first off, right? So I'm not going to say who the 16 seed is here, right? Maybe that's me actually, since I don't actually get to put a book forward. So thank you, Earl. Those were two compelling arguments for some pretty good books. All right, we're on to our next pitch. All right, Dr. Wolf, you have the floor.
That is a really hard act to follow, so I'll do my best. My first choice is a book called Giving Voice, Mobile Communication, Disability, and Inequality. And this is by Dr. Merle Alper. And the book came out in 2017, and it is a result of her dissertation. So it's a fantastic mentor text for scholars who want to move a dissertation to text. It is a book that I recommend over and over and over to my students. I teach our qualitative methods course in our doctoral program. And this is a beautiful example of a qualitative study. One of my favorite chapters is actually her methods chapter at the end. She has a beautiful section which details the methodology and everything that she did in the study. So beyond the mentor text side of things, the topic of the study is a iPad implementation with a group of students who have speech disabilities. And it is an incredibly well done study that goes over the implementation and looks at all sorts of different issues of inequality among the students and the parents in the situation. So I highly recommend giving voice. That's my first one. I think the time's up for number one. So number two, second book I recommend is from Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom, and this is Lower Ed, The Troubling Rise of For-Profit Colleges in the New Economy. And while this book is centered on for-profit colleges, it is highly relevant to anyone that is working in any sort of online education context. This book, I can't remember if I mentioned, both books came out in 2017. It was a good year for amazing books. This book knocked me off my feet as a former director of an online program, and really had me rethink and think about the way our program was being run and the types of education that we're engaging in. And so for anyone, again, that has anything to do with online learning, I strongly, strongly recommend this book, and also recommend any of Dr. Cottom's books. They're all fantastic, but this one in particular brings up some really, really important issues around for-profit education and online in particular, ones that all contexts can take from. So I think that's it.
All right. Yeah, I like to bring in the competition so you all just kind of pass each other, right? Like as one of you's coming off of the court. Yeah.
Good game. Good game.
So a couple, again, two more really compelling examples of books. I like the different types of books we're getting already. You're already seeing how like malleable these technology topics are. So, all right, we'll go right to Marie Heath.
All right, thanks. I feel like I might be the 16th seed after those two, but my first book that I'm recommending is Ruja Benjamin's Race After Technology. And much like Earl's book, the title is sort of a play on that idea. In this book, she is making the case that technology itself is encoded, embedded with power, particularly with racism. And so it reinforces racism within society. And it does so under the guise of acting as if it's a neutral, distant algorithm that is somehow rational and reasonable. So it sort of hides the racism within it. And when we see what are perhaps glitches in the system, those glitches are actually clues that we can follow to find the racism embedded within the technology itself. And what I really like about this book is that she is just a really clear thinker and writer. And so the book is just every word makes sense and needs to be in there. And the last chapter is called Retooling Solidarity, Reimagining Justice. And I often struggle with, so what should we do? Where do we go? And I think that this last chapter is almost a preview of the book that's coming up, which I'm really excited that it's got coming out, which is an imaginary relationship with technology. So that was my first one. My second book is kind of a sleeper. Wait, there it is. It's not technically about technology. It's Audre Lorde's collection of essays, which include the essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. And I think of it, obviously not an extension of this book because it's earlier in chronological time, but it's almost like for me, a way to rethink about if technology is embedded with power, then we're not going to reimagine just futures using our existing technology. And so thinking about the sort of cautions that Audre Lorde gave to white feminists saying, you can't use that rational reasoning of the patriarchy, you're as a weapon essentially against Black women. Our liberation is bound up together. We need to have new ways of thinking and new ways of honoring knowledge so that we can move towards liberation. And so there are several essays in here that speak to that to me, for thinking, like, it gives me different frames to think about technology beyond that sort of rational, reasoning, it's just a neutral algorithm, it's just all science and math, that there is something embodied and something emotional about it, and that that way of thinking, that rational way of thinking, is actually all wrapped up in sort of patriarchal and whiteness, and reimagining and thinking about technology and just futures. We need to think about Black feminism. So that's my second book. I don't know if it's going to count or not, but I'm throwing it in the ring.
We have a student who is pushing the limits of the assignment, which is actually one of the, of course, most important things that happens in technologies when we figure out what do we mean by it. And historically, the techniques we use, right, are very wrapped up in the definitions of technology. So as the ref here, I'm going to say it counts. Okay. I'm going to say it's good. And so we will not disqualify it at this point. Okay.
Can you hear me now? I think we're all right. Okay. Can I start with the other one, Dan? All right. So I'm going to start with Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. So this book is in the cultural critique tradition of stuff like cultural narcissism, Benjamin Barber's Consumed. But it's qualitatively different in the sense that it's not a critique of aesthetics, it's a critique of epistemology. And this is where the media stuff comes in. For Postman, he argues that basically he's making an argument of media as epistemology, the way that information is organized, presented, or ignored, and ultimately consumed and understood. It depends to a great extent on the medium in which the information is presented. And so he's greatly concerned with the shift to the screen that's happening. This is written in 1985. So he's seeing the shift in political discourse and other things as a result of the dominance of television over the past couple decades. And an important example he uses is Reagan. So he points out that our politics have been kind of distorted through things like this. So, Reagan, who wasn't a particularly intelligent person, but was brilliant on TV, because TV makes the presentation more and more important. And I think this is still true today. Anyway, it's a very good book. And I got to stop ranting and go to the next one, which is Mcloone, Understanding Media. So Postman's actually building on understandings from Mcloone. So one of the most famous phrases from this book is "the medium is the message," and what Mcloone was trying to say is, the content of media is ultimately less important than the characteristics of the medium itself. And so one of the deep insights that Mcloone brings is this idea of media and our perception based on sense engagement. So he argued that the visual shift of reading and also the bodily comportment of it, and the shift to what he called the tactile experience of TV, gave us a very different experience of media. And so we started understanding media in very different ways. And so what he meant by tactile is that all of our senses are being engaged at once. And so it's akin to kind of being there. And so through the framing of television, we're more easily manipulated than we would be if we're reading content. And he also he gets into some stuff that's really prescient today, thinking about the global village stuff. A lot of people misinterpreted that and think that he, sees that in a positive way, but he was very concerned about the retribalization of humanity happening in a digital environment. And we've seen a lot of that toward negative effects the last few years. So there I go.
I'm very conscious right now in thinking about what Mcloone and Postman would say about our little event here. I'm afraid they'd critique us, right? This is no way to discuss books in 90-second segments using
Yeah.
video technology. Why don't you write each other some letters?
Yeah, I was thinking that, the telegraphic discourse, this wouldn't be possible without us already kind of shifting to that paradigm. But I didn't want to say it and be an asshole, but I was thinking it.
Well, we're going to go with, over, instead of going to Mcloone and those, we're going to go to Brad's take, which is that basket and swish. So shot and swish. There we go. I think so. So we're going to defer to the chat culture. And so, which several people are now joining in from our group here. Marie, see your comment. Yay, so many good and varied books. And Earl is here too. He found the chat. So there we go. All right. So we are into our next one. Here we go.
All right. I forget which one I did first.
Let me get.
Okay. So keeping with the theme of slightly older books, so I chose Langdon Winter's Autonomous Technology. So yeah, another older book. It's about 45 years old, but I think the arguments in it very much hold up today. And I'll say at the outset, it's probably not like the most approachable book. It's a little bit dense at times, but I think it's really valuable. Winter's a political theorist, and so he's sort of entering into a conversation not just about sort of a critique of technology, but even a critique about the ways that we critique technology and theorize technology and think about technology. And so he sort of engages folks like Mcloone and Jacques Ellul and other people who are theorizing technology at the time. And one of the things that sort of gets him a bit frustrated, and that I think rightly so, is the fact that even a lot of really, really smart criticism of technology often sort of comes down to some matter of saying, like, sure, technology gives us some good stuff, but also there are these drawbacks, there are these negative consequences as well. And so that's usually where the conversation kind of ends. It's this sort of like, there's pros and cons, and there's no real mechanism for like making actual like choices about where you go from there. And so a lot of what Winter's kind of getting at is this idea that it's because that's actually like a political question. And so the sort of deliberation or failure to sort of be able to make decisions about technology is actually a retreat from politics. And so Winter's kind of laying out a political framework for thinking about technology. And that, the sort of technologies that we use, they don't have these, sort of like inevitable consequences, but they do make certain worlds possible and make other worlds less likely to come about. And he says, effectively, that's the sort of like the real question that we should be asking when we get caught up in these kind of like debates about technophilia or technophobia. Really, we need to be asking questions about technopolitics. What is the world that we want to live in, and what technologies make it more or less likely for those worlds to come about? Those are predominantly political concerns. And so I think it's a book that through lots of different essays kind of explores that idea about how we sort of approach technology from a sort of like political stance, which I think is a really valuable and sort of enduringly useful perspective. And then my second book is Ruth Cowan's More Work for Mother. And this is a history of household technology from the open hearth to the microwave. And it's also a sort of landmark text in sort of feminist science studies, history of technology. And so the book sort of like turns the sort of common sense idea, particularly at the time that it was written in also the mid 80s, that sort of modern technologies have eased the workload of everyone's workload, but specifically in this case of the average like housewife. And so it does several things simultaneously really well. So it's a history of household technology, and it's written very approachably, but it also traces the social factors that shaped the development and adoption of those technologies, and it considers those relations or those dynamics in relation to the sort of evolution of gender roles. And so while modernization certainly does eliminate some kinds of work, it also changes the nature of household work. and ways that sort of compounded the expectations of what actually had to be done. So, the changing ideals of cleanliness makes you have to do laundry more often, and changing diets or more varied diets mean that you have to do more complex kinds of cooking, and even new appliances like reallocated tasks that previously you'd give to commercial agencies, and they fall back to the housewife. And so even though she's primarily looking at domestic labor, particularly sort of gendered domestic labor, I think the sort of arguments and methods of the book are really informative for lots of other settings. So rather than sort of taking at face value the sort of time-saving claims that we hear, Cowan sort of pushes us to say, how do sort of technologies sort of interact with work systems, and then also with kind of larger social systems. So it's not that the technologies she's describing are inherently discriminatory, but innovations that emerge from and then get applied to social settings with long histories of, in this case, gendered discrimination. It shouldn't surprise us that their adoption is going to sort of reinforce those norms. And I think as an educator, I think this definitely applies to a lot of the time-saving kinds of technologies that teachers get handed. And I would very much love to read the More Work for Teacher book whenever somebody decides to write that. So yeah, those are my picks.
Ooh, I can't wait. So you're actually, I don't know if I should take points away. Did you just offer us an assignment, put forth an assignment for us to complete, to write a book? It actually sounds like a pretty compelling project. But thank you for those. And I love the differences again we're seeing here, like picking a book about household technologies and the unpredictable effects they have. Is some of that. So the chat is going. Everyone has discovered the chat, if you didn't know, because Leigh is cheering us on, I think, as we go. Tori Trust, the famous Tori Trust, is here, and she's gonna struggle choosing options, although she already has a favorite, so one's capturing her mind already. Marie was definitely fascinated with everything going on here, as was Leigh here. So I love the chat. Everyone. Oops, sorry. I think we lost it for just a second there. All right, we're going to go to our final person. Keep the comments going in the stream. And we have Jacob Pleasance finishing us off. Last, but certainly not least.
I'm going to benefit from the recency effect here. So, all right, first book I'm going to talk about here is a book called What Things Do. And this is written by the philosopher Peter Paul Verbeek. And I'm going to be upfront. This is a book of philosophy. It's heavy. It's pretty dense. But for those of you who enjoy that kind of careful analysis and really just deep sort of precision of thought, this one is extremely valuable. And here's why I think this one is so important. To me, reasoning deeply about technology, entering into that space requires one radical way that you rethink the world, and it's to recognize that things do stuff. That's a pretty philosophically precise way to put it. But at the crux of it is to recognize that the things we surround ourselves with affect us. They do things. And this is the central theme that he engages in this book, and he looks at it from a very careful philosophical perspective. It essentially is asking the question, when we say that our technologies do things, what exactly does that mean? From a philosophical perspective, what do we mean when we say that sort of thing? And one of the things that I think is particularly useful about this book, it's a somewhat more recent book, and he really goes through the history of philosophical thought on this topic. So if it's one of the only philosophical books you read, make it this one. All right, there's book number one. Book number two is The Design of Everyday Things, which sits in a very similar space, but is much more approachable and is kind of a delight to read, where the other is, I think, a lot of intellectual work. This is written by Donald Norman. He sits in the industrial design space. This book has been sometimes called like the Bible of like human computer interactions and the field of human-centered design. And I love this book because it makes you rethink mundane technologies and to recognize all the different and varied ways that these things sculpt our behavior and affect us from a psychological perspective in ways that will blow your mind. You will never look at a doorknob the same way. He takes up wonderful examples of the poor design of doors, of toilet paper dispensers, of steering wheels. And but when he gets into these things, they're whimsical at times. His writing is quite entertaining, but also it really makes you think, and it makes you start to realize just all these little tiny ways that all the things we surround ourselves with do things. I mean, it touches on the same theme as the other book. It really does, but it does so from a very different direction. And again, this is one of those books that after I read it, I never looked at my world the same way again. And I've appreciated every minute of that. So there's book number 2.
Well, thank you so much for both of those books. Yes, a main thing that scholars are trying to do, both with our friends, with our students, is to make sure that you cannot walk through life without having to think about every single thing you encounter. So, Jacob, thank you. I look forward to staring at doorknobs and not ever making my way places because I'm looking at every single everyday thing that's around me. So, well, we have quite a few good suggestions, and I agree with what Tori said in the chat earlier, that this is going to be really difficult to make decisions about what we're going to do. But so what I think we need to do next is to allow the audience to put some bonus books in that we can add for votes here. So if anyone in the audience wants to add in the chat their suggestions of books, we can add them into the overall race here, and we can add them in and they can get votes. And so we can see. So does anybody want to, oops, sorry, let me get back here. Does anybody from the audience want to add in any books? I suspect we must have some books that people want to. So look at the ones. Oh, did Tori put one in here? So as I'm doing this, as we allow, here we go. So we have our first suggestion. Brad, who's had some great comments already, is already putting in automated media. I don't know if anyone has read that book, Brad. Feel free if you want to put any kind of explanation, we can give you a moment in the chat to add it in, but I will make sure to get automated media on our board as another option here. So what I'm going to do, I want to do here in just a moment, we can still take options if you're still typing them in and putting them in here. What we're going to do here in a moment is everyone needs to narrow down their 3 choices that they're going to choose. And so what we can do is you can just, if you access the chat, you can use either the public or the private chat to tell me your votes. And then I'm going to let you all discuss these books. And so the question I think I'd like to ask to all of our participants here is, how can educators and scholars continue to learn from books that have been written about technology, and for what ends? Like, what if say we dive in and we start reading these books, how does it change our teaching? How does it change our curriculum? How does it change our lives? And so I think I would like to open up the discussion. So I'm going to bring in our full panel as we take any other additional books. Oop. Sorry, y'all. Oh, sorry, I just lost my video for just a second there. And we can also have a discussion. You can talk about any books that maybe didn't just barely miss the cut. Of course, I had to have a slide with some other books that people suggested. We had people with backup books that they wanted to suggest, and you could see, I of course had to add in a few books here that I just thought, I'm very disappointed with Dr. Heath here for not including Zainab Tufekci's Twitter and Tear Gas, which is a book we spent a lot of time with and working with. But these were some other books that our participants mentioned as backups or that I thought we could add. So these are just some other examples. Jacob said he wanted to put Alone Together, which is a book that's pretty well known about our relationships with technology. And here's Marie trying to apologize. We do not accept this as a backup. We will contact Zainab Tufekci and let her know. So, all right, so if anyone else has any books, let me know. And what we'll do is you can go ahead and start adding in your votes into the chat. So go ahead and put your books into the chat if you want to put all 3 of them in there. Each one will be worth half a point. So there's no order to these. You can go and add it in the chat. And then as we're doing that, I'm going to bring our whole group back in to answer that question. What do we do with all these books, right? How do we grow our field? How do we keep growing as individuals? So let me bring everyone else back in the chat and we can discuss. So I'm going to turn it over to all.
So I'm gonna freely admit that so many books just hit me that I don't know if I remember like the names and titles everybody did. So here's what I'm thinking. Like, if each of us is currently on the YouTube chat, maybe we just each relist the two that we stated, or okay, Dan's got us covered. We're going through the. Okay, got it. I for one am very, very. I want to read Disruption Fixation. This one just like struck me as like, oh, I want to get this one now. So I'm going to totally vote for that. Just saying.
This is one of the ones I put on my list, the lower ed. I thought Leigh really sold it. Plus, I feel like Tressie McMillan caught him. Everything she writes, I really enjoy.
I thought it was so fun to see like the span of ages, and like some of the older books. I did already the idea of making the what is it? The teacher. I need to go back and look through the text here. The book about, help me out, feminism and
more work for mother.
More for teacher. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah. Like that was like boom, and that's what books do for us, right? They help us think, and like new things can be produced and new ideas, and it's that one I've already got bookmarked to see if I can get a digital download to like read it tomorrow, because I'm so excited to see that one.
Whoops, I put mine in private chat.
Here's what I'm wrestling with. There's some books that you all talked about that I've read, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was great. In fact, I mean, there are all the ones that you all suggested. Like, I've read that. That sounds great. But I don't want that to influence my vote. Like, yes, I know this book, and I know this book is great. But then there's these other books that I haven't read that like they probably are great too. And this is what's hard. So I'm gonna try to make all three of my votes for something I have not read. That is a totally personal choice. I'm gonna do it. That's my thinking.
I respect that choice. I think that's going to pass all the rules. That's one way to go. I will say it disadvantages perhaps some of the older books or the more popular ones, but I think that's a good choice. I actually also did that. I picked things that I haven't read yet.
I'm going to scroll back through these one more time so everyone can take a look. I'll go a little quicker, but I'll go both ways. So if you want to identify it, and then I will start adding up the scores so that I can get us a final before. So you all can keep chatting again about what should we do with these? And maybe, by the way, what we need to do is just form a class around them, right? Is this the curriculum? We read all these books over a semester. But yeah, how can we make sense of using books like this, but not just for ourselves, but like to move towards something. So I will leave that discussion to you all. I'll scroll through the books and add things up.
So the More Work for Mother book, I was just reading about the technology of Aga ovens and stoves in England, and the man who invented them. Apparently, I don't know if this is in that book or not, Phil. Were you the person who recommended it, right? Yeah, that he was watching his wife and realizing how much work she was doing. So he thought he would design this stove so she would do less work. And all I could think was like, you could have pitched in, like, but what you'd rather do is build her a stove where she has to do less work.
Yeah, there's I don't think that specific stories, although it's been a little bit since I've read it, so maybe it is. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is there are all of these examples of like time-saving things that actually like save time for like things that men or children like did that were like part of the process that like led up to the stuff that like the women were being asked to do. So it's like it's time saving, but by eliminating like only certain parts of the tedious work, not all of them. So yeah, it's yeah.
Oh, Brad's got a good question. What books could pair together well? Like, would the design of everyday things and more work for a mother make an interesting pairing? Are there other ones that could pair well, do you think?
I haven't read Glitch Feminism, but I saw that as a backup. It sounds like that might be a good match for the mother book as well, maybe. Just by the title alone. Has anyone read that one?
I added that one. Yeah, Glitch Feminism by London Russell is a really powerful book of talking about intersectional feminism, which really centers queer folks and their stories and their relationships, not only online, but AFK, away from keyboard. And so it's a really powerful book that challenged me to rethink a lot of things. And so that's why I added that as a suggested one.
You know, the suggestion of which of these pair together, I think, is perhaps that is the best question. I mean, like, if we had to take these books and like get it to a reading list that's perhaps manageable, 5. But like, what I think is profound and I think is amazing from this conversation as you all went through your books is just all these different angles and different perspectives, people coming from such different places. And entering this conversation from totally different angles. I mean, the books are different, and yet they speak to one another in this amazing way. So I could totally see this just like beautiful compilation of, you know, one book that's more in the philosophical realm, one in the media studies realm, one and just all down the road. And it's like, this would be a beautiful course to design.
So my degree program I graduated from changed. So it started out, the name of the degree was Learning, Technology, and Culture. And actually, I think all these books fall really well under that hat rather than Ed Tech and Ed Psych, which is what I ended up the degree being named. And so I think it's fascinating to think of educational technology or, you know, the space we're in too, and how those conversations have sort of shifted over time. And I see them shifting back to the learning, technology, and culture sort of realm, which is kind of fascinating to see, I think, through these books as well.
And I know Erl has to go here in just a moment. Erl, of course, this is recorded, so we want to allow you the opportunity. Y'all, I'm still adding up. I'm adding up the books. Keep chatting. Pair the books. Come up with more combinations. What are we going to do with the books when we're done with them, right? I do sometimes like when we can. Recently, some of us read Audrey Waters' new Teaching Machines book, and it was really interesting because I was like, oh, this is, if nothing else, a really good lesson for class. And so I wonder if these other books, do you see lessons that we could take straight into education classes? And Erl, I'm going to put you back in so you can wave goodbye. Sorry, I accidentally think I took him out. I'm working on this, you all. I'm doing my best here to have everyone included. Navigating all of this is easier said than done. I should have had an assistant with scores. Okay, back to scoring. You all chat.
I like the idea that Jacob brought up about pairing a philosophical book with or an application book or something like that. You know, I like the opportunity, and I sort of accidentally, I think, did that with the two choices that I had. One is, you know, both are race after technology. Obviously, is grounded in theory, but it feels like when you read it that you can see she uses all of these real world examples. So something that you can sort of dig into philosophy or theory behind it, and then also see the sort of the touchable, or I loved how Jacob described his book as a delight to read, you know, the tangible of it. So books that make that kind of pairing. Lance, what's a media book that we could use that's more tangible, less dense maybe than, or maybe Postman is not, I think he's less dense. What would you say?
I think Postman's pretty accessible. I don't know. I feel like I only read dense things, so that makes it hard.
I made the comment in the chat, but Michelle had mentioned John Durham Peters' book Marvelous Clouds, and I think it's actually like I don't know that it's super accessible, but it's really interesting sort of thinking about media in like this very, very broad sense, and explicitly ecological, that I think is really interesting to like pair with some of the like Postman, Mcloone, their version of sort of media ecology, like, which I think is you know, ecology as a metaphor. For Peters even getting into like, well, what would it mean if we like went even further to take it literally, like environmental media and like elemental media. And so thinking about things like fire, air, water themselves as things that mediate experience. So he has like whole chapters on like ocean life and communication and things like that. And it's not just like how do dolphins communicate, but like how does thinking about the way that dolphins communicate change the ways that we think about other forms of mediation. And so I think there's some really interesting ways that like Peters like pushes on some of those ideas that, you know, sometimes like media studies folks don't always take them up as they maybe did a couple decades ago. But actually there's still a lot there. And I think Peters is a really good bridge to sort of like show just how valuable some of those ideas are. We don't need to like, you know, leave them in the past just because they were written a while ago. I say that as someone who also picked books that were written many decades ago. So the past has insights that maybe help us think a little differently about the present than, you know, the stuff that's immediately accessible to us, I think.
Did you all have that like third choices that we didn't, you know, honorable mentions that didn't make it that you were thinking about?
I'm surprised that Critical Theory of Technology, Feenberg didn't get in here. I figured, Marie, you might pick that one. So
yeah, it's over there on the shelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. I don't know.
That's
a dense one too.
It's heavy, the heavy philosophical stuff. One of the things I would love to have a deeper conversation with all of you about is, and I genuinely think this is the case, like you can't really fully grapple with this topic by reading just a single book, right? It's like a journey. Every one of us has had a journey, but I bet we've all entered with different things and have our own sort of unique reading history. And I know for me, like by the time I got real deep into this, I was thinking about things so differently that if I went back and read some of the earlier stuff, I would have like, you know, it would have hit me so differently. And I think it would be really fun. I don't know how to reconstruct my own reading history. That is beyond me. But it would be fun to kind of compare our experiences as travelers, essentially, through these topics.
I think that would be so cool. I had mentioned Technopoly was one of my backups, and that I read like that. I remember writing about it in my master's degree application, and I would love to like pull up that app, that essay, the book, and then read it now and to see like how that has gone. That would be an amazing exercise. That would be super cool.
Okay, I think I've got a total here. So let me see if the slides are going to let me pull this up. Thank you all for bearing with me as I kind of tried to make that happen. I think actually I can get us all in the stream. So this was really fun. And the point was to talk about books, right? And to think about and just to start a conversation. And let me see if these slides, if in this presentation are going to update for me. Let me see, because I updated it myself. Let's see here. Oh, it didn't update on here. Okay, so what I can do, this is our scoreboard here. Maybe I'd have to reload this to re-upload it, but I'll go ahead. You can see all the books here, and I can go ahead and tell you the books that ended up winning out. So the highest rated book, if you didn't know, based on my adding this up really quickly in a chaotic manner, which means that I definitely didn't miscount anything, is Disruptive Fixation. Was the highest book. It just barely beat out More Work for Mother. And then following in tied with More Work for Mother was The Design of Everyday Things. So those were our top 3 books. After that, we had a whole range of them. Lower Ed was the next one that came in. And then we had a couple that tied, Giving Voice and Autonomous Tech, which came in as an audience entry, came in there too. So all of the books, let's see, almost all of the books got votes. We were close. I won't name the books that didn't because they're also excellent books, but it seems like we really had a good range. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add this book list in order on our site. We'll add it with the video. And then I guess it's next. Maybe in the comments section of the blog, we could start organizing our book clubs, our pairings, our meetups about who wants to read these. And the coolest thing is, if you want to read one of these books, somebody already proposed it who read that book, right? And so we know who we can go to. I always love talking to people about books I've read in the past and people reigniting their interest in those books. So we are just past 6 o'clock and I don't want to hold anyone past, but thank you all so much for joining in this first event. This is a good trial run, and we would love suggestions for what events we want to have next. So if our panel, feel free, if everyone wants to say bye, we can all kind of wave our way out. Thank you all.
See ya. Thank you.